at WHMP.
Welcome to NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile Poet Laureate Rich Michelson.
Two erstwhile Poet Laureates here. Let's
and former and previous erstwhile Poet
Erstwhile
Laureate.
and second while.
all right.
Martín Espada.
Martín Espada is here, and I think our listening audience knows Martín's work very well. The Pablo Neruda of North American authors. His latest book, Vivas to Those Who Have Failed. Incredible book. Make sure you get that, and make sure you get it tomorrow night, where Martín will be reading at the Mount Toby Meeting House in Leverett, Massachusetts. That's at 7:30 tomorrow, Mount Toby Meeting House. Go on to mounttobyconcerts.wordpress and reserve your ticket, because this is going to sell out, and you should be there. Martín, welcome.
Thank you. Always good to be back.
You are reading tomorrow night with Colleen Cattell, who will be doing music. So it's music and poetry. She is a performer who has toured with Holly Near, played with Pete Seeger. And you've been busy lately. You were here not that recently for your Truth to Power reading.
Yes.
And now you are going to be raising money for Puerto Rico.
That's right.
We need it. We need it there. A portion of your proceeds for the entrance fee is going to go to help Puerto Rico and all the books. So this is your chance to get Vivas to Those Who Have Failed. Help yourself with some great poetry. Bring some needed funds to Puerto Rico. Where's the money going?
Well, the money is going to a grassroots organization on the island. It's called Comedores Sociales de Puerto Rico. Best translated as community kitchens, distinct from soup kitchens in the sense that barter is at the heart of that transaction. This is an organization that feeds people in need, but those people are also involved. It might be a matter of donating time, donating labor, donating some material, and of course, if you have nothing, you still get fed. They're very emphatic about that. But at the same time, it's very important to point out this is not charity, this is not a handout, this is community. These are community kitchens, and the idea is to serve meals with dignity, as opposed to what happened with President Trump tossing paper towels into the crowd of hurricane victims not that long
Unbelievable.
ago. So this is Comedores Sociales de Puerto Rico. And actually, I'll give you their website, too, as long as we're here. It's www.cdpecpr.org. That's www.cdpecpr.org. And when you go to that website, you see two things. You see PayPal button where you can donate directly, but you also see a clip about this organization, about their founder, Giovanni Roberto, from a story that was done in English by Al Jazeera, right? Not NBC, not CBS, of course, Al Jazeera. And you could learn more about that organization there. But we thought it was important to identify an organization like this, and it was identified for me by a journalist on the island by the name of Maritza Stancic. And if you're reading about Puerto Rico in English, you're probably reading Maritza. And she recommended this group, and the idea is to fill the need that is not being filled by FEMA or by President Trump.
So, Martín, help me out with this. It was a front page story in the New York Times today, big story, on the continuing disaster in Puerto Rico. There was this clip in the Republican newspaper that had a summary of everything that is still not right, not fixed, and the ongoing, I think, humanitarian and environmental disaster that has accompanied the hurricane. What do you hear? What do you know about what the status of lives in Puerto Rico are like today?
That it's much worse than anybody has heard up to this point. This is very personal for me, and not simply because I'm Puerto Rican. John Lee Anderson in The New Yorker, and I'm paraphrasing now, said that utuado is become a byword for devastation. Utuado is a town in the Cordillera Central, up in the mountains. It is a town that has now been the subject of stories in newspapers from the New York Times to the Chicago Tribune to the LA Times. And that is become the metaphor for the not only destruction of the island, but the subsequent neglect of the island.
I mean, it's something like 50, 60, 80% of the people don't have electricity. 25, 35, 45% of the people still don't have water. I mean, we're talking about a humanitarian disaster in part of the United States.
Yes, and what I was getting at is that, it's worse in the interior. It's worse in rural areas. Those numbers become meaningless once you get up into the mountains. My father was born there in Utuado. My grandmother was born there in Utuado. My great-grandfather was the mayor of Utuado. I've been there. The first time I went there, I thought it was the most beautiful place in the world. Now people are dying. And so the urgency of this is what I need to communicate, and the urgency is what's been missing so far.
Right. And what's amazing is we often feel overwhelmed. We don't know where to turn. We don't know what to do. This is important because you, I know personally, found, you researched this. You found an organization that people can feel comfortable giving money to, and you can make a difference. You can actually make a difference, and you can do this too and enjoy some poetry and music tomorrow night, and feel like that you're helping the cause. This is going to get to the people.
Yes. Now, there's something else I want to emphasize, though. It's giving money is essential. Giving money is important, and I urge people to give money any way they can to any organization they feel comfortable with. If you're used to giving money to Oxfam, do that. Fine. But there's another word I'm going to use here, and that word is solidarity. It's very important for people to show up. To be present, to be there for an event like this one. The Puerto Ricans in this valley who have been working around the issues arising from the devastation of their island feel isolated. They feel overwhelmed. They feel exhausted. They feel depressed. They need to know they have allies, and they need to see the faces. They need people to show up and express their solidarity by putting themselves physically in the same place. In terms of an event like this, which is tomorrow night, 7:30 at the Friends Meeting House in Leverett, as part of the Mount Toby concert series. I will be appearing and reading poetry about Puerto Rico. I will be on stage or sharing the stage with Colleen Catao, who is a bilingual singer-songwriter. She does Nueva Canción, for example, a new song. You may be familiar with that. She is political as well, just as I am. Some people might wonder, why Leverett? Why are you doing this in Leverett? Well, first of all, Leverett's not that far away. It's not the dark side of the moon. Secondly, it's important.
It's not surrounded by an ocean. You can get there.
Yeah. Secondly, they asked. They said, would you do this? And
so I've been to some of these performances at the Friends Meeting House. It's a real experience. It's genuinely moving. It's a great venue. The sound is terrific, and it's a really moving experience to share that with the audience.
Right. Get your reservation, MountTobyConcerts.wordpress. You're listening to NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio. I'm Rich Michelson. My guest is Martín Espada, and we are going to be back in a moment and hear some poetry.
This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
The Bill Newman Show is brought to you with the support of the Odyssey Bookshop, South Hadley. Independent book selling since 1963.
This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
Had the wrong intro there.
We continue NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile poet laureates, Rich Michelson and Martín Espada.
It's actually Poets Laureate.
Right, it's like Attorneys General.
It's...
okay, I'm not doing it again.
So, I do
Saturday,
enjoy
tomorrow
being
night, October 21st, 7:30, Mount Toby Meeting House in 194 Long Plain Road, Leverett, the Friends Meeting House. Martín Espada and Colleen Catao. Colleen has shared the stage with Pete Seeger, with Holly Neer, She's toured with Tom Paxton. I mean, it's really going to be an emotional experience. Her band, Dos X's, won the band concert at the Grassroots
Dos Equis.
Festival. X's,
Think of the beer.
2 Corinthians double. At the Grassroots Festival of Music and Dance in Ithaca, New York. Martín Espada, start us off here in this segment with a poem.
For me, Puerto Rico was always my father. My father was always Puerto Rico. His name was Espada, Francisco Luis Espada. He was born there. As I mentioned, he was born in the mountain town of Utuado, Puerto Rico. In 1930, he died in Pacifica, California in 2014. And when he died, I wrote a series of poems about him, including several poems that are also about Puerto Rico. This next poem is about how he came here. He came to this country on a boat, a steamship. It's called the San Jacinto, St. Hyacinth. And the way he always told the story was that the ship brought him here. And then on its return voyage, the ship was sunk by a Nazi U-boat. So this is about that. It also refers to a luminescent bay in Puerto Rico called La Parguera, which I hope is still there. This is called The Sinking of the San Jacinto, for my father, Frank Espada. Coming to this country was the worst thing that ever happened to me, you would say. The steamship called the San Jacinto dragged you from Puerto Rico to New York. You swore in Spanish, dangling from the rails like a nauseous acrobat, a seasick boy who prayed to plunge over the side and disappear into the green water. A Nazi U-boat trailed behind the San Jacinto on the voyage back to Puerto Rico. The torpedo splintered the deck 6,000 tons, creaking and sinking into the sea. Among the dead, Ramon Castillo, who shoveled the coal into the furnace down below, Antonio Cortés, who cleared the plates in the officers' mess, daydreaming of La Parguera, the luminescent bay, illumination of water on a moonless night. You escaped the U-boat. 7 decades later, the torpedo catches up to you, ripping through your heart, and you sink into a moonless sea like the 6,000 tons of the San Jacinto, Ramon Castillo and his shovel full of coal, Antonio Cortés and his armload of plates. I kissed the ground, you would say, sitting at the kitchen table in Brooklyn, and I tried to imagine licking the dirt off my own lips. Years after the San Jacinto took you away, you would return to your island, step off the plane, drop to your knees at the airport, and kiss the ground. Back you came to Brooklyn, a car stalled on the highway, steam pouring from the hood, when all you wanted was the sand of the beach burning your feet. Now, if your ancestors wait for you anywhere, they wait on the shores of the bay at La Parguera. May you navigate through the night without the compass devoured by the salt of the sea. May you rise up in the luminescent bay, stirring the microscopic creatures in the water back to life so their light startles your eyes. May the water glow blue as a hyacinth in your hands.
Martín Espada reading tomorrow night at Mount Toby Meeting House, Friends Meeting House in Leverett at 7:30 with Colleen Cattell. Be there, get your reservations. That's absolutely powerful and beautiful poem, Martín. And let me just say, because decided this on this moment. Your father, Frank Espada, an incredible photographer whose work we have been honored to show in our gallery. And let me just say that if people are interested in seeing your dad's work, check out our Michelson Gallery's website, Frank Espada, and any sales that we have of your dad's work, we're going to give 100% of the profits to this organization that you found. I think this is a good chance to do a little something extra here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the organization, again, is called Comedores Sociales de Puerto Rico, Community Kitchens of Puerto Rico, founded by Giovanni Roberto. Their website is www.cdpecpr.org, but they will be receiving the funds that are donated from the concert tomorrow night, where I will be appearing with Colleen Katow at the Friends Meeting House in Leverett, 7:30 p.m.
Be there. It's
An evening of music and
it's gonna
poetry
be a great show
to support hurricane relief in Puerto Rico. Should we turn to
Sure.
a sad passing? I know, Rich Michelson, that you were friends with one of the most famous poets in American history, certainly in the 20th and 21st century, Richard Wilbur, who lived here in the Valley. There is a long piece on him that has you featured in this week's Hampshire Life magazine. Tell us what you can, please, about Richard Wilbur and what your reflections are.
Richard Wilbur was a gentleman in every sense of the word. I've known Richard for 30-something years. Every interaction was absolutely wonderful. He was a kind man, a generous man, a great poet. And I think that the humor and emotion of his work is often overlooked because he was such a beautiful formalist as well, one of the great poets of our time. And in fact, one of the sad moments of my life is that a few years ago, Richard Wilbur was slated to get the Emily Dickinson Tell It Slant Award, and I was on my way to pick him up to bring him to this show. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember.
It was 7:30 in the morning. I was in my car. I stopped briefly at the gallery to, I stopped briefly. And, and there was a call for me from Richard with great apologies, saying that he would not be able to make the morning show because he was in the hospital. And his concern was not for him, was for disappointing us for that morning show. It was, and that was just so typical of his work, of his mannerisms, of his beings. He cared for other people. For myself, I'm very pleased that there's a documentary coming out on his life that I was interviewed for. He also wrote for children and was one of the few poets who wrote for both children and adults, took it seriously. He always told me that that all poetry, no matter how serious, no matter how important, it had to begin with a sense of play. And that's something that I have carried within myself. It can go anywhere, but it needs to start with a sense of play, a sense of joy. You have to be in love with the words. And Richard was a man in love with words, who were just pleased to be one of the great poets. What was your experience, Martin?
He was 96 years old, so this is sad but not tragic.
Yeah.
I met Richard a couple of times, and I was always impressed by his dignity.
Yes.
And his
Good
generosity. He came out of nowhere, it seemed, to do benefit reading with a group of poets at the Odyssey Bookshop. I was just very impressed with his presence. I'll use that word again. And you don't associate Richard Wilbur with a word like solidarity, but he expressed it that day.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
And was a mentor in many ways. He was for those of our listeners who say I don't know a lot about poetry, he was an extraordinary figure in American letters and in American poetry.
Pulitzer Prize, just about every award that could be gotten. So we mourn Richard. I also want to mention that tonight at Smith College, Robert Haas, winner also of a Pulitzer Prize and National Book Award, will be reading at 7:30 in the Weinstein Auditorium. So that is this evening.
And I'd like to conclude, if we might, with another short poem from Martín Espada.
My native costume. When you come to visit, said a teacher from the suburban school, don't forget to wear your native costume. But I'm a lawyer, I said. My native costume is a pinstripe suit. You know, the teacher said, a Puerto Rican costume. Like a guayabera? The shirt, I said. but it's February. The children want to see a native costume, the teacher said. So I went to the suburban school, embroidered guayabera short-sleeve shirt over a turtleneck, and said, "Look, kids, cultural adaptation."
Martín Espada from Zapates Disciple, a book that was banned in Tucson. And he is reading tomorrow night at the Mount Toby Meeting House, 7:30. Thank you very much, Martín.
You're very welcome.
An evening of poetry and music with Colleen Cateau and Martín Espada.